Greetings. This is the Counter-Racist Evolving Engineer Program. The acronym for the program is Cree, C-R-E-E. And that is my handle. It's just, well, 2 toes over the line for Saturday, June 29th, 2019. It's about 2 a.m. my time. And I'm recording this as the thing that you're hearing now on the live stream or the YouTube premiere function. And I'm going to do it like a live stream. I'm going to do it so it'll be like a live stream squared. It's not going to have a high production value just because it's being premiered. If I were to do that, I wouldn't be able to do it at all. That would be too labor intensive for me. And it is going to be, as you're hearing it now, it's airing 2 hours early because I have a commitment for the usual and advertised time for this program at 4 p.m. on Saturdays, my time, and 7 p.m. Eastern. And I can't do it Sunday because I have to be getting ready for something special. Know what I mean, ladies? And then, but besides that, Kofi over at Countering Racism, Anti-Blackness had said that he was thinking about doing a live stream on the Democratic presidential debates on this weekend, and he usually does them on Sunday. So I didn't want to be interfering with that. So here we go. I'm going to go to the visuals first instead of a bunch of long commentary, and then I'll wrap it up with my commentary, and that will be the end of the live stream. But during the live stream, I will just be in the chat box interacting with anyone who wants to interact with me. I mean, that's the purpose of a premiere. I'm calling it a live stream, but it's not a live stream. It's a live stream squared, which means it's a premiere the way that I'm doing it. Okay, so yeah, I'll be in the chat box and listening to this just as you folks are listening to it, and we can discuss and be keyboard warriors or colleagues, whatever you want to call them. And I will say out front as a teaser, I'm going to mention a couple of prominent YouTubers who talk about the issues of race and black people's position in it. Brother Holopsism, make sure I say it right. I believe the way you pronounce it is Brother Holopsism, and I think he was a guest, or they were doing a simulcast with Search for Uhuru, and it just appeared in my YouTube newsfeed today. And I think they would be considered, and they consider themselves the creme de la creme, the cream of the crop in terms of YouTube analysis of the black condition. And so they not only analyze what our situation is, but they analyze what the other analysis is on YouTube by other, black people. And I have an analysis of them or some questions for them. So that's a teaser. And if you fellas want to holler at your girl, you can, or you could ignore me. But I have some questions for you. And it really goes along with my question of whether or not you've ever considered that perhaps there might be some women who could think as or more strategically than you. And it's centered around some just basic strategy and basic logic that I've just seen everybody just ignore. And I don't know if it's just I don't know if it's a willfulness, if it's based in male ego. I don't know what it is, but I will certainly let you know what that is and what I thought I heard you two men avoiding during the discussion that I listened to intently this afternoon about the form of reparations being nationhood versus checks being cut to individuals or to institutions specifically designated to serve Native Black Americans, or what people are calling ADOS. I don't like that because it's not race specific. I've said that a zillion times, but it doesn't matter because I don't know how many people have listened to any previous, so I'll say it again. So I said I was going to do a bunch of a long commentary before I got to something else for you to look at, and then I would get into my commentary. So let me do that since I am now, how many minutes into this? 4? Okay, I feel pretty good about that. All right, well, so what we'll do is we're going to display capture, and we're going to go to just tabs. Like I said, live stream squared. This is a couple of minutes, fair use, giving you a warning, Dane Calloway. I'm just going to use a couple of minutes, and it's going to be used in a different way that you use it. But this is from a video on Dane Calloway's channel. And just so you see what it is, Untold Truth About Reparations, ADOS, and Slavery in America. You should be happy because I'm probably generating views for you, for your channel. But I'm just going to use a couple minutes. Here we go.
According to a well-known anthropologist by the name of Margaret Mead, you don't come into a place with an attitude of entitlement, because people generally enjoy when you learn their language and their culture. As long as you come into a place ready to learn and join their society, it's okay. It's very flattering for all people when someone wants to be taught. And also, Margaret Mead stated, quote, "You have to do something pretty terrible to people before they come to regard you as a spy, rather than an interested explorer." And that is exactly what they did when they adopted our ancestors' constitutions and created confederacies that reflected our ancestors' form of government. The Articles of Confederation and Perpetual Union was a set of laws which was used to form the first U.S. government in the year 1777.
Okay, so now he's going on with a focus that is different than what I wanted to say on this. My focus for that was just, that's a human nature thing that we've taken for granted. You saw those pictures of largely black people. And what Margaret Mead, the famed anthropologist, said, if you go in and you act like you just want to learn, people are very happy and flattered that you want to teach them, that you want to learn from them, that you want to learn their ways. And as far as I can see, that's exactly what we did. We gave up the goods. We were the most technologically advanced people on the planet. And many of the kingdoms, the black kingdoms all over the planet. And it looks like non-black peoples, we know for sure, white peoples went in and acted like they just wanted to learn. So what happened? We transferred knowledge, which means that we transferred the technology of the time. All our knowledge of geometry and metal working and astronomy, all that kind of stuff, ship making, all that stuff. We freely gave that. But you can see now, over these hundreds of thousands of years, it hasn't been given back. And you can see that that instinct to want to give what you know is not just restricted to black people. Because the way you can see that is you can see all of these do-it-yourself, DIY videos all over YouTube. And a lot of them, they're not monetized, and they'll just be people who've learned how to do a certain thing, and they just want to share their knowledge with the world. People like to share what they know, especially if it's helpful. And that's the only joy people get, they get out of doing it. And it's mostly like 90-something% white people showing practical how-tos on how to do just about anything on any kind of vehicle, how to make a drone, how to paint this, how to make that, people, they like to do that. But the question is, why haven't they taught us? Why is there such a huge technology gap between all of the black peoples of the world and non-black peoples? Is there any record where, I've never even seen any place, and they love to talk crap about us. I have never seen it written where a non-black person has said, we tried to teach them how to make XYZ tool, or how to use this certain kind of irrigation, or how to automate this, or how to make this type of industry, but they didn't want to learn, or we really, really tried to teach them and they couldn't. They'd love to say that, I think, if it were true. I've never seen that written anywhere. And so there I have to assume that they never tried. They never wanted to. Now, we know they like to share what they learn. I just given an example of YouTube about that. So then why haven't they shown us? Why is there a technology transfer gap? And so then you might ask, well, why didn't we just do it on our own? Why weren't we able to develop parallel to them just because of our own initiative and our own intelligence? And I'll answer that question in a bit too, but I know you get tired of looking at the same old thing. So let's go to another tab and just get another illustration of this, this gap in technology, so that you can see who it is and so that it's fair use. BBC, queued it up. Here we go.
C'est que l'Afrique a besoin d'une source qui est sûre, une source qui est fiable, parce que l'énergie hydroélectrique, c'est une énergie propre et renouvelable. Et nous l'avons sur le site d'Inga en permanence et en quantité.
But promises have been made before, and nothing has happened. The story of the Congo is often the story of lost or squandered opportunity.
Okay, so if it doesn't show it in the next video, and it very well may not, I want to emphasize that the Congo's river has such a volume of water that moves so fast that it has the capacity to provide abundant power for the entire huge continent of Africa. Just the Congo River alone. And before you do anything, you have to have energy. Like, technology requires energy first if you're going to automate anything, right? And that one river has enough power to power all of Africa. So you ask yourself, why in the world haven't the people there or somewhere on that huge, vast continent figured out a way to harness that? We know white people have built the Panama Canal, and they have underground cables, under ocean cables across Atlantic. They have railroads that go around and they cut through canyons. The Japanese, or it's the Chinese, have robotic ways of laying railways now in high places so that it doesn't require people and it doesn't endanger lives. They've used the resources of the earth to do these things, and therefore, with all these resources in energy and everything else on Africa, or you could even say in the Americas before white folks got here, why haven't black people why didn't we develop parallel to them? But more on the gap. Let's go to this next demonstration of it. And this is all going to tie into this whole reparations, Democratic candidate thing. But let's see what else we have here. This is also about the Congo.
The ritual is to wish them good fortune, hunting in the forest. And we are going with them. They're looking for wildlife and useful plants along the way. They block animal holes and use smoke to force them out. It's the way they've always hunted. But a century ago, King Leopold discovered there was something in the forest worth a huge amount of money. Rubber. This white sap from the wild rubber vines could be collected and made into tires for bicycles and then cars. But before rubber plantations industrialized the process, this was the only source, deep in the forest. And so the pygmies were made to collect it.
Tango elitakara bankoko bakiso balena mpasi le beloko mpimbo mbebeta nkakanga donc mbloka nkomo epenya bon tofo le zéro tofo sale mpe rien to yala nko mpimpita bekpa bi tofo ate bekpa yanko bimpita déjà il y a le penya nkomo jamais. Le couteau caille, donc au coup si tu allais prison, mais quand même Dieu au volé, donc aucun n'a pas au coup qu'on a au coup soit même l'anjo.
The feared whip was called a chicot, and made from dried hippo hide. But an even more brutal punishment was common. Some of those who didn't collect enough rubber had their hands cut off. Up to 10 million people died under the regime of King Leopold II. And early photographs of atrocities led to the world's first international human rights campaign. It hastened the end of King Leopold's rule, but his personal colony, which had made him rich, was handed over to Belgium in 1908, only for exploitation and brutality to continue. It was the Belgian Congo until 1960, even though there was little free about it for the Congolese. With independence came retribution and a great white flight from the country. Many Belgians left. The Congolese were handed a place rich with natural resources, but without the knowledge and training to use them.
Boom! The Congolese were left with a land rich in natural resources, but without the knowledge to use them. See, that's where it's all at. It's all at knowledge. Knowledge is what generates all that other stuff. Knowledge of how to use the resources of the earth, the way the waters run, the stuff that's in the ground, the step-by-step process of making one thing into another, into something more refined in order to make what you need. And so you have all these factories, and so this is what happened in South Africa. This is what happened in Zimbabwe. This is what will happen to us if we get our own land somewhere, even if it's rich in resources. Where's the step-by-step knowledge that guy that's down in the ground, underneath your street doing who knows what when you pass by, when they have little barricades up? Where's the step-by-step knowledge on how to do all that stuff so that we can flip on our light switch, so that water comes out, so that we have internet, so that we have whatever kinds of aluminums or materials that we need to make speakers out of, or bed frames and all that kind of stuff? Where's the knowledge? Why don't we have that knowledge to do for ourselves? Non-Black people leave, and then it all dries up because they took their knowledge with them, and we didn't get it ourselves. We didn't get it before they got there. We didn't get it while they were there. We haven't gotten it since. Huge technology gap. And the question is why? The white folks took their knowledge with them and we couldn't figure it out before or after? That's the issue. It's the knowledge. The knowledge is the problem. Once you have knowledge in you, then you generate activity, and that activity, eventually you have trade, and then you have currency. You make up money, you print money in order to facilitate trade and all that kind of stuff. And then you set up universities to learn even more, and the cycle continues. It's all about the knowledge. It's not about cutting a check. It's not even about having a nation. And see, Brother Holopsism and Mr. Search for Uhuru, I don't actually know what you call yourself. Can I ask you a question? What do you think the fundamental purpose of a nation is? And what do you think is its first prerequisite? Its foremost prerequisite? Do you think that the purpose of a nation is the purpose of any mutual aid society? So that you can do things on an economy of scale, like roads and railways and communication systems, etc.? And do you think that the first prerequisite for all of that is defense? Because unless you can defend it physically, it doesn't matter what you do. And so if you start talking about nations, I heard in that conversation about making sure that you're putting the horse before the cart, not vice versa. When you were talking about people asking for checks instead of nationhood, I'm asking you if you're putting the cart before the horse, or maybe you have it the other way around, if you're thinking about nationhood before you're thinking about how you're going to defend it, how you're going to close that technology gap to be able to defend it. And I would say that well-meaning non-Black people show their good faith by giving us lands rich in resources and putting an infrastructure in there, setting up a system whereby we can observe the installation of that infrastructure, and setting up a situation where we can learn to maintain it and improve upon it. And part of that good faith would be to do it right here in the United States of America so as to eliminate a few threats of hostile acts towards us. One would, of course, be nuclear attacks, because that would be fatal for everyone on this continent. Second, biological warfare would be very difficult, because it's difficult to contain that, even if it's ethno-specific, because it's very difficult to make it that ethnic specific, especially if it's going to mutate. And even certain sorts of chemical warfare will be hard to contain, because then once the chemicals are in the ground, they can be reverse engineered or reused. So you kind of eliminate that, and that would show a good faith effort. So if I'm wrong, if I'm this radical, paranoid, wrong person, and the people who think like me are, we would love to be proven wrong by people like Mr. President Donald Trump, who I tweeted right after I saw the Democratic presidential debate, the second one. And I saw the pandering being done, and I could see that the Democratic Party really couldn't give two cow poops about the Native Black American vote. If we could be silly enough to give it to them, but they've already decided that they'll hitch their wagon to the Hispanics. It was a bunch of pandering. They want to give free legal health care, free health care to undocumented immigrants, with air quotes, that used to be called illegal aliens or illegal immigrants, because it is technically against the law, and so therefore it's illegal. They hold us to the letter of every law. I don't understand why we can't hold them to the letter of the law. And therefore reinstating DACA. It was all about the pandering. They were speaking Spanish. They'll throw us over the boat. They've done it before. They did it right after Reconstruction. That's what ended Reconstruction, actually. The Dems and the Repubs basically said, like, I don't know if you've ever been at a Lions Club meeting or any kind of meeting that runs on Robert's Rules of Order or any semblance thereof. There's a move that anybody can make. They could say, I moved the table, and that means you just stop discussing it and you move on to other business. And so white folks of various persuasions, whether they be Union forces, Confederate forces, Republicans, Democrats, Jews, and WASPs, whatever, they move the table, whatever has to do with us, so they can move on with other business. And part of business, of course, is terrorizing us as long as we're around, or starving us out. That's what happened with the Hayes-Tilden Compromise right after the Civil War. So you had a bunch of black people who had trades and crafts, and the feds were there protecting black people's rights, restraining the white Southerners from severe violence. And then the election came, and the balance of the election, I should read it, put something else on here. Immediately after the presidential election of 1876, this is the Compromise of 1877. Immediately after the presidential election of 1876, it became clear that the outcome of the race hinged largely on disputed returns from Florida, Louisiana, and South Carolina, the only three states in the South with Reconstruction-era Republican government still in power, as a bipartisan congressional commission debated over the outcome early in 1877, debated over the outcome in 2019. Allies of the Republican Party candidate, maybe Donald Trump, but in this case, Rutherford Hayes, met in secret with modern Southern Democrats. So, yeah, modern Democrats, the field of, 22 candidates, to negotiate an acceptance of Hayes' election. In other words, whoever's going to get elected, we're going to negotiate this, and it's not going to be about giving anything to black people or doing black people right. The Democrats agreed not to block Hayes' victory on the condition that the Republicans withdraw all federal troops from the South. That means a reign of terror. They knew what was going to happen. They knew slaughter was going to happen to black people. And that's just so they could go ahead and get their candidate in. They didn't care. And that's what I see happening right now in 2019. Okay? I see them deciding that they're hitching their wagon. They're hitching their wagon to the Hispanics. As a result of the so-called Compromise of 1877 or Compromise of 1876, Florida, Louisiana, and South Carolina became Democratic once again. It's effectively marking the end of the Reconstruction era. This is what I heard during that second debate, when all of them raised their hands saying that they were for free health care for undocumented immigrants. And so when I heard that, I knew that probably the best way to go for reparations is to go for what I said. Our own lands where we can do our own thing. But this time, and I think we've been better at it than Africans. Sue me, right? We have to know what we're doing. But we still have a long way to go. We have a knowledge gap. We have a technology gap. We have a lot of people who know a lot of things. We just don't know we don't have an asset inventory. We don't know what black people know, because if you look at what black people are doing all over NASA, you look at the great accomplishments in the defense industry, all over technology, we'll see black people have done a whole bunch of things, have been fundamental, but we don't know that they're doing it. We don't know where they are. We don't have an asset map of what our knowledge base is. Whatever it is, it's still lacking. We don't have everything we need. So we need the ability to be able to learn that stuff so we can maintain our infrastructure for ourselves. Okay? So that would be the difference this time, if they let us, have our own lands. Here's another example in Africa. Now, Ethiopia has a lot of people that are not black people, as you know, as some people know, as they've listened to this venue. There are a lot of people in Ethiopia who are not phenotypically black. They wouldn't score 195 on the algorithm designed to determine that. But there are a lot of black people there too. Kola Booth she told me once, I think it was during the broadcast I did with her on Blog Talk Radio, that the Oromo people, of which her mother hailed, she said her mother was coal black, not just blue black, that the Oromo people were the most populous. You'd never know that by what you see in terms of the immigrants that come over here. But there are a lot of people there who are not black. But the point is, since there are a lot of people there that are black, it doesn't surprise me. And I remember the first time I learned about this, just wild. It was just wild. I was going to make a trip to Lalibela with an organization called Water for Africa here in San Diego. Just lucked out. I met this woman, this black woman, and she had a couple of free tickets, and she dangled them to people to get them to help her organize. And it was dangled in front of me. I didn't know it was being dangled. I thought it was actually being offered. I didn't end up going. She ended up taking a couple of other people. But the point is that I went to a whole bunch of meetings. And at one point, I was scratching my head. Well, not a whole bunch. I went to 2-3 meetings. I think on the second meeting, they were telling us what to expect once we got, because I was expecting to go, once we got in country. How long everything would take, how many breakdowns there would be, how we would sit there for a long time if a car broke down, how we would see a lot of tractors, Caterpillar tractors that were just sitting broken in the fields, and that they couldn't, I was wondering, why can't, it's called Water for Africa, why can't they irrigate their own lands? Why can't they dig their own wells? And we were being told about the crudeness of the tools we were going to use, axes and picks. I'm like, I don't understand. Why don't they have more advanced tools? Why are all these vehicles? Why is all this technology sitting broken with rust on it? And they all just said nonchalantly, because nobody knows how to fix it and we don't know how to get the parts. I said, well, why can't you machine the parts? And they looked at me like I had two heads. And then I started talking about, wait a minute. Now, this really happened. It was about 10 years ago. So I said, more than 10 years ago. I said, the Nile runs through Ethiopia. Why don't you have water? And why don't you have water? I mean, the Nile. And why don't you have energy? Why don't you have hydroelectric energy where you can build anything? And the room stopped. And they looked at me and they said, they'll kill us. They'll kill us if we dam up the Nile at all. So that's another example, is Ethiopia taking control of the River Nile. And I'm really making reference to the black people here. And in those meetings, I did see black people. There were some non-black people. It was like 2/3 non-black, 1/3 black of the people these were Ethiopian people and a few black Americans. But anyways, in this article, it's a CNN, fair use. Look at Egypt on Google Earth. And we're going to do that in a second. I'll scroll down. And you will see a green line snaking through a sand-colored landscape, fanning out into a triangle in the north. This emerald ribbon is the vegetation that grows on either side of the Nile River and around its delta. It is Egypt's only fertile land and testament to the country's reliance on this fabled waterway. So let's take a look at this picture. Look at Egypt. It's desert. But everything that they grow is right in this little green strip here. That's the Nile. The Nile Basin extends to 11 African countries, but Egypt, giving it the wrong emphasis, but Egypt, one of the oldest civilizations in the world. So even though it extends to 11 countries, it says Egypt, which is now, completely ruled by and taken over. There are a lot of black people still there, but mostly it's non-black people. Egypt has controlled the river and used the lion's share of its waters for millennia. In other words, since non-black people took over. And then it says that could be about to change. Ethiopia's very big dam. The Blue Nile River is the Nile's largest tributary and supplies about 85% of the water entering Egypt. Without water, you can't live. Ethiopia is building its $5 billion Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, GERD, on the Blue Nile, near the border with Sudan. When completed, it will be the largest dam in Africa, generating around 6,000 megawatts of electricity for both domestic use and export. So we're talking about not just water, but electricity, right? Power, because you can have power to have technology. Ethiopia's ambitious project is designed to help lift its fast-growing population out of poverty. But the new dam also puts management of the flow of the Blue Nile in Ethiopia's hands. And that has sparked a power shift in the region. Now, I know this can't be black people. Not yet. For the Egyptians, the Nile is literally a lifeline. The vast majority of the country's 97 million people live along its banks. It's like, this is a quote, it's like somebody has control over a tap. If the Ethiopian people, for some reason, want to reduce the amount of water coming into Egypt, it would be a great problem. Talk about an understatement, right? You don't get water, you're dead. You're dead in days. Water scarcity is a serious issue already for that North African nation, according to the UN's Food and Agricultural Organization. In 2014, Egypt had 637 cubic meters per capita, compared to 9,538 cubic meters per capita, meaning per person, in the United States, nearly 15 times as much. And the population's it's just gonna get bigger. So Ethiopia, because they're less black, I hope there's not a whole bunch of percussive sounds with my P's and B's on this mic, but anyway, because they're less black, I would expect them to be first to assert themselves technologically. But I remember sitting around that table and they said they would kill us if we tried to stop the dam. So either they plan on just taking a little bit of that power, a little bit of that water and letting it go through, or they're prepared militarily. I don't think they're prepared militarily, because they wouldn't just be having to contend with Egypt, they'd have to be contending with the Arab alliances. I don't think those other 11 African countries are prepared to assist them. They wouldn't be able to. I know they're not. And I certainly don't expect the other non-black peoples of the world, whether that's China, Korea, Britain, Australia, the United States, not to align with Egypt. So they got the whole world on them. What are they going to do? So they could have an upper hand with the water if they had the ability to defend their efforts. And this is what we're going to be facing when we get our own land, if we were to get our own land. If we're not wiped out in the process of trying. And I'm asking Brother Holopsism and the host of Search for Uhuru, have you thought about that when you're talking about nationhood? When you're singing the praises of Marcus Garvey? Because Marcus Garvey had a famous quote that said, "Do not be deceived. There is no justice but strength." Bottom line, bottom line comes down to muscle, force, physical force, which means technology. Okay. So I just let you see the tweet. Oh, which one is it? Yeah, this is the one that I tweeted right out to my first one. I've never done another one. I don't know if anybody's gonna catch its attention. He did fill Omarosa's slot, so there is now in the White House a director of outreach for African American affairs. And since he was asked, and he filled that post maybe within a day or two of being asked for the first time about reparations, and he didn't say he was for or against it, which I found really interesting. He just said, "I don't see it happening." Yeah, he said it's a really strange thing. I don't see it happening. I'd like to know what he thinks. Or he said it's a really funny thing. I wonder what he thinks is funny. I wonder. And but he says he doesn't see it happening. That's some wiggle room. That's not saying no, I'm against it. And President Trump has been known to say, brought to my attention by Kofi, he's like my research extraordinaire, like executive colleague. It was brought to my attention that as far as he knows, that's the only prominent white person he's ever heard say publicly that he didn't think that the people who were calling themselves Indians and getting all these casino monies and developing lands looked like Indians. So I wonder if it were brought to his attention that some of the Native Americans were black people, as I've already done a broadcast on that. So if you haven't heard that broadcast, if you haven't listened to it, go look at it. It's not what you think it is. It isn't the usual smoke and mirrors that these Moorish Americans, that I'm not trying to paint a broad brush of all. All I'm saying is I haven't seen like really well-sourced, even though it's available, it's readily available. They could have gotten it at the same place they got the images. I haven't seen somebody put together a well-sourced presentation that clearly there were black Native Americans here at the time that Europeans arrived, and some of it is in that broadcast where I show the images that were done by white folks, and I show the quotations by white folks at the time they got here, and it clearly showed that they were black people, like by my tool, by my algorithm, not just dark-skinned people with silky hair. No, I mean, people with crisp curls or nappy hair, and black people, clearly. And I wonder if Mr. Trump were made aware of that, if he would be willing to use his executive pen to designate some of that as historical for us, because we're a historical people. We deserve to be preserved, and and there's a cost to that kind of reparation. There's a time cost to money. And so, like, when you go to court and you sue somebody for breach of contract or something, and they got in the way of something, you get to sue for lost economic opportunities. So this is why we would deserve having infrastructure built for us there. But of course, we can't just let them do it for us. We're gonna need some help, obviously, right? But we got to learn how to maintain it and do it for ourselves. But that's what I asked him. And then and the reason I did that like during the debate, or when did I do this? What time in the morning was it? 1:06 a.m. I don't know if that's Eastern, but at the time I think I was watching the debate on replay, and when I saw like all this pandering to Hispanics, and I knew that we were about to have a Hayes-Tilden compromise 2020 style. I knew they were dumping us for Hispanics. They were tabling us. They were tabling black people. That whole reparations thing. I could see that wasn't going to happen. I said, okay, this is worth a shot. And so, so I tweeted him. I think, I'll read it. Mr. President, designating lands and funds for training Native Black Americans, NBA, another use of it, in building and maintaining infrastructure on it. Nothing would better ensure your legacy, and it would win back the black vote for your party, the real NBA, the art of the deal, because that he can do a deal. He's a land developer. That's what he's done. He's a genius at that. So if anybody could do it, he could do it. And before I sent that tweet to President Trump, I posted this on my timeline. And it was, again, while I was watching the freaking debate. The Dems are not going to grieve losing the Native Black American vote. Each just said they support free health care for undocumented immigrants. Dear Mr. President Trump, please sign an executive order designating lands for Native Black Americans and enough money to train the engineers, medical practitioners, tradespeople, farmers, and scientists to run it. You'll get black people's vote, and maybe a lot of non-black people's votes too, because you'd get us out of their sight. I hate to say it that way, and maybe I'm wrong, and if I'm wrong, well-meaning people will understand why I've taken that position, and they will make good faith efforts to disabuse me of my false belief. And then I say, as long as the Republicans don't aid and abet hostile acts against us on that land, the poisoning of the water and so on, I don't think they would go back to bombing. But as long as Republicans don't aid and abet hostile acts against us on that land, black people would remain loyal to your party. So it's a win-win for everybody. A real separate but equal. It's not equal until we have the resources, but we also have to have the knowledge to be able to utilize those resources. And first and foremost, to be able to defend ourselves. And to be defended until we can. So no federal troops leaving. We're gonna need to be defended until we can defend ourselves. There's never been anything in the record that showed that we wanted to hurt non-black people just for the sake of it. And like, if I haven't said it already, because this flow chart is pretty rough, where is the record where white people have said that they've tried to teach us technological skills, but we didn't want to learn it, or we didn't have the capacity. Because like I said, if I haven't already said it, but I've said it in my mind several times, if that were true, with the kinds of things they like to say about us, it would have been written somewhere. And so since I haven't seen it, if it doesn't exist, it's because they haven't done it. They don't want to trade technology with us. Now, right after the Hayes Tilden Compromise, which is what I think we just fast forwarded 100 years. So right after they decided, they're going to table black people's affairs, we had the first major wave of immigration. You can see there it said it started in the 1880s. And that's right after that happened, right? Right after that election. And what they say it was? 1870 something. 1877, right. So after that, you have a bunch of black people with skills who could participate in the economy, but they bring in a bunch of immigrants from Europe, Southern and Eastern Europe, to take the skilled trades, which at that time were primarily done by black people. And so this is what I see happening with Hispanics. Okay. So I'm just saying, yeah, I suppose there would have been another way to do it. There would have been another way to, let's not get, I heard those young men on that broadcast talk about how silly it is to say cut the check as a slogan. To whom are you to cut the check? And I think that there are intelligent responses that have already been given to that by people who are affiliate themselves with the ADOS movement. And they say, well, there's a program for that. No one is saying that it has to be checks given to individuals, but there are a number of services that will cost money, and a number of goods that will cost money, that would be administered by our people, And my big concern with that is that I know within a couple of generations that won't be black people. Just like as Kofi has said, it will incentivize already. So we already have a bunch of people claiming to be black formally to get scholarships and so on. They're not black, and we know like 35,000 to 55,000 of them per year just decide to just go ahead and say they're white. It's because they look white, and that's just a small number who look white. Not about the other, and not just the ones who look non-black are not treated as black, because the difference is black non-black. It's not white non-white. Right? And then you're incentivizing all of that. And so when you have such a low barrier, such a low, what's the word for it? It's a ridiculous level of proof. One ancestor that was enslaved, and you're going back 400 years. Do you know how many ancestors that is? Do you know how many non-black people can claim one ancestor if they could find one? The other question is, how few black people will be able to document one? There will probably be, because of the resources that they have, it wouldn't surprise me that there were just as many non-black people who could actually document one as were black people who could not. But putting that aside, it's going to incentivize racial mixing. If you don't have a phenotype requirement, you get these people will be marrying into families, and that wealth will be passed down, and the next thing you know it, because of selective mating, black people will be out again. And it's like, do we have a responsibility to our children and our grandchildren? Do we? Or is it going to be like maybe what got us into this situation in the first place? So I have a series of cartoons that lead me into talking about how I think we got in the situation in the first place. How do we get into this technology gap? Well, see, this here is the video that Steve Lift from the movie Sorry to Bother You was trying to show Cassius Green in terms of why they invented these equisapiens, this hybrid between horse and man. But it was instructive. So he made him sit down at gunpoint and watch this on the television. And so I just took some screenshots. So they're talking about the natural development of tools. And then they say, but what are tools? You see, I put on the closed captioning so you could read it. What are tools? If not extensions or appendages. And they show the arm there. You see, you got the arm. You're using the coconut as a weapon. But the coconut is an extension of the arm. And then this second one, this is the second one. So now you have some sort of club or hatchet, which again is an extension of the arm. That a tool is an extension of our appendages, our arms and our legs. And they say humans have modified ourselves throughout history. This was them trying to explain, why it was okay to modify people into half human, half horse. But, there are people now that say that, we are already a hybrid between the way people are hooked up to their phones. We're already a hybrid between computer and human. But this is a, remote control, which is, another extension of an appendage, just an electronic one. And so, again, the question is, why do we have this? How do we get into this huge technology gap? Because the question is, while non-Black people were developing all of this technology and not sharing it with us, because we know they like to share like everybody else. We were sharing with them, and then they were sharing with each other, but they were not sharing with us, even though we know they like to share, but they don't like to share with us, being repetitive. There's still the question of, there were so many of us, we had so many resources, we had such a head start. Why didn't we develop our own technology? It might have been somewhat different, but why didn't we develop it at the same pace that they did? Because if we had, we wouldn't have been susceptible to their attacks. We would have had technology to fight them off. We lost because we didn't have the technology. That's the reason we lost. We didn't have the foresight to have the technology to keep up with them. And I suspect that what happened is what happens when you don't have women helping inform your strategy. I suspect that, like Margaret Mead said, non-Black people came in to all the great Black civilizations, acted like they wanted to learn, and flattered the egos of the Black males. Flattered them. Never let them know they were trying to copy and do better, to come back and conquer. And so we didn't feel like we had any need. The Black males didn't feel like they had any need to develop anything special, because they were having sex with their women, and they were being flattered as to how brilliant they were and how great everything was, until they got toppled, because non-Black people were busy working and trading and collaborating with one another. And so now we have such a huge gap that it's long odds to catch up. But it just has to be one great idea. I don't see how it's going to be possible for us to just get exactly what they have. What we're going to need is some sort of innovation. We just need a good idea. We need a fantastic idea. We need somebody who can think outside the box. Like the person or persons who eventually get the cure to cancer, it's going to be somebody who thinks outside the box. The reason that hasn't been solved is because you don't have people who can think laterally. They're thinking vertically. So, I say if anybody can do it, it would be us, because Black people are the most innovative people on the planet. And I happen to think my tribe of Black people are the most innovative by the evidence. Native Black Americans. But we're hostage now. And I want to know if you want to start getting serious about learning technology before you start talking about nations. And I want to know, for the non-Black people out there, if you're good-willed, are you willing to leave us alone while we're learning it? And are you willing to teach us? Are you willing to share with us the technology that you haven't been for millennia? Because you took from us. Are you willing to take your chances? Why? And that's another thing. If you keep us here, we can't do nuclear attacks against you. Why would we? Because that's mutually assured destruction. Well, that was my lesson from the Democratic National Debate on how they're going to treat Black people, and hopefully we'll be talking about this in the live stream, or have already talked about it, because whatever time it is that you're hearing this, I've got to take off at about 4:30 for what I have to do on Saturday afternoon. It's been recording a little less than an hour. I'm pretty happy with that, because that's going to give me an hour to perhaps put up a real quick live stream to keep talking if we have to, if we didn't exhaust what we had to say while we were typing away to one another. So we'll see how this works, because if we were typing to one another, did you really get a chance to watch it? I don't know. But most people will not be watching this during the premiere. It'll just be posted. And I remember when I was a school teacher, so many days I didn't take roll. Like, that's the first thing you're supposed to do, is take roll, and at the end of the term, I would have to try to remember who was, it was terrible. Take roll, or whatever the paperwork was. I would just get right into the lesson, just right into the teaching, testing, and all of that. And so that feature of my personality has got to be reformed, because I'm doing the same thing here on YouTube. At the very beginning of every video, you're supposed to say what? Hey, as you come in, make sure that you like the video and subscribe and hit the notification bell. So now I don't say it until the very end, but yeah, at least I'm saying it, and I'll be able to type it, I guess, in the live chat. So make sure you do all those things. Share it on social media. Help our message grow. Our messages repair, even if it's for ourselves or if it's a combination of our help and help from our government and private industry, but only for the people who need it. The only people who inherited the cost and cast of slavery and Jim Crow, etc., are Black people, phenotypically Black people. Let's not get into the genetics argument. Nobody's denying you anything on the basis of that DNA test you have in your back pocket, and I've explained in a lot of comments why you could read up on it. DNA is good for large population groups. It is not good science for determining individual ancestry. It's just silly the way that they do the arithmetic. It's just silly. It doesn't measure anything useful. And if you read it, mostly that's what it will say. It's just a commercial gimmick. Okay. Well, I don't have anything else, and I hope you take stock of our situation and discuss it with your near and dear if you can. And in the meantime, stay safe and stay healthy. And hopefully we'll interact next week. Signing out. This has been the Counter-Racist Evolving Engineer Program, the Cree program, for June 29th, 2019.